Okay, so the first thing I'm going to start with is cutting my pattern pieces. I opted to print my pattern using A0, the A0 format. You can pick whatever you want to pick. So I'm going to put my pages together, then I'm going to proceed to cut my pattern pieces. So now that I also have all of my pattern pieces cut from my fabric, I did use a polycotton fabric. I'm gonna work on my bows first. You can make your bows as big as you want them. The pattern pieces for the bow are just like, optional. It's according to whatever you feel comfortable with. You can choose to make them a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger. It's all up to you. So to make my bows, I want to make my bows how I would normally sew a strap. And how I would do this is I would just fold the bow um in half lengthwise, right sides facing each other. Then I'm going to stitch all the way down. Then I'm going to trim off the excess seam allowance. And after I've done that, I'm going to turn the piece inside out. Then, yeah. So when I am done putting sewing my straps, what I like to do is I'm going to press them down with an iron nice and flat, and the raw edges that are on the raw short edges, basically I'm going to fold them in once, and then I'm going to press them down with an iron just like that. So this is what my strap will look like. So not my strap, my bow. Now I'm gonna start working on my straps. And for my straps, I'm doing the exact same thing. And also for my facing and interfacing pieces, all I'm gonna do is just take my facing pieces and iron the interfacing onto them. I am using non-woven fusible interfacing, and I'm doing this for all of my facing pieces. That's the front and the back pieces. So when I'm done ironing the interfacing onto the facing pieces, I'm going to move on with sewing my straps. And for the straps, I'm going to do a similar process to what I did for the bows, where I'm just going to fold them in half lengthwise, right sides together. Then I'm going to trim off the excess seam allowance. Then I'm going to use my loop turner to turn the piece inside out. Then I'm going to press it down with an iron. Then I'm gonna go ahead and just grab my facing pieces. And then what I'm doing is I'm just putting the back and the front piece right sides together. Then I'm pinning at the side seams. Then I'm gonna stitch the side seam. Then trim off the, well, I'm not doing it now, but later on I will trim off the excess seam allowance. To finish my raw edges, I will be using an overcast foot. Basically, an overcast foot is going to give you a finish that is similar to like a serger. Without a serger, I would highly recommend that you get this foot if you can. If you can't, you are going to just be using your traditional zigzag stitch. So now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start working on my top piece, right? For my top piece, I'm going to start with attaching my side front to my center front piece. And I'm going to do this by placing the pieces right sides together like that. And then I want to make sure that I'm matching up the notches. Then I'm going to go ahead and stitch. You might need to use pins for this process, but I'm not using pins because I'm, pretty confident that I'll just, get the precision right. But this is how you would do that. So put them right sides together, make sure that the notches are lined up, and then go ahead and just complete that stitch. And then grab the other piece and do the exact same thing. For this next step, I've put my, I'm stitching on my side back onto my side front. Obviously, I put the pieces right sides together and then I stitched the side back to the side front. And then I'm going to keep on repeating the process until I have put my top piece together. So for the next part of the process, I would then need to stitch my center back to my side back piece. And it's going to basically be the exact same process. Put the pieces right sides together, pin the seam that you want to stitch, and then go ahead and stitch the seam. When I'm done with my top piece, I'm going to set it aside and then let's move on to the skirt. So for the skirt, what I'm doing is over here, seems as though I'm starting with the back piece. So for the back piece, all I'm going to do is literally take my center back and my side back, put them right sides together, make sure if there are any notches, I'm going to line up those notches and go ahead and just stitch those pieces together. So, I'm going to do the exact same thing with the other back skirt pieces. I'm just going to put them, right sides together. Make sure that if there are any notches on those pieces, I'm lining them up. And then I'm just going to take them to my sewing machine and just stitch everything in place. Now, to work on our front skirt pieces, it's going to be a little different. So you are going to need to focus, extra hard on this part because remember it does have a slit. So this is what we're going to do, right? I have my side front piece. I'm going to put it along with my center front piece. At this point, you have to decide where you want your slits to be, right? So you're gonna take where there isn't going to be a slit, you're gonna put those two pieces right sides together, and then you're gonna stitch them. And then at this point, I want you to not stitch the other piece because we first need to finish the raw edges of that seam before we put the other piece together. So at this point, you're probably wondering what it is that I'm doing, right? So what I did was I went ahead and I attached my back skirt to my front skirt, and remember I haven't attached the other panel for the front skirt. So from what you can see, I have the center front and the side front that have been put together and I'm attaching them to the back skirt. I haven't attached the other panel for the front of the skirt because remember that's where I'm going to be doing my slit. So basically I'm putting the entire skirt together, but I'm not going to put those two pieces together where I'm going to work on the slit because I have to finish it first before actually doing that. Woo, I hope that actually makes sense and isn't as complicated as I've made it out to be. So now for that other piece, what I'm doing is I'm attaching that side front piece. I'm attaching it to the side back skirt piece, and then I'm going to stitch everything in place. Right. So for one of your skirt pieces, you're going to have the back and the front. And then for the other one, you're just going to have three pieces, which is going to be the center back, the side back, and the side front. And the other one is going to be the center front, side back, and center back piece. So I'm so glad that there's a video that is going to explain this, that's going to help, show visually what it is that I'm doing. So now I'm going to go ahead and just like start trimming the excess seam allowance. Remember, I'm not using a serger for this project because I want this project to be like extremely beginner friendly and stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and just trim everything that needs to be like trim off the excess seam allowance because I'm going to be using my overcast foot. Overcast foot is not going to be able to trim that excess seam allowance like how my serger would be. So I have to manually do this part myself. I'm going to do this on all my pieces. This is all the skirt pieces and also the top piece and also the facing pieces. Well, there's one facing piece that's been put together. So yeah. When I'm done trimming everything, I'm going to take my pieces to my sewing machine and I've installed my overcast foot over here. And as you can see, it is now finishing off those raw edges. And the finish is almost very similar to what an overlocker or a serger would do, except this is not a serger, this is not an overlocker, but it's a really fast and inexpensive way to work and, still be able to still be able to have that professional finish. Because I know sometimes when you are a beginner, you can be quite self-conscious about the finish of your clothes. But I would highly recommend getting this overcast foot. Um, So then again, for my facing pieces, right, I'm going to do exactly what I've been doing where I'm just finishing that raw edge of the side seam that I stitched. But the most important thing is I'm also going to make sure that I'm finishing the lower edge of the facing piece. Now I'm going to move on to attaching my straps. And how you do this is when you're attaching your straps, you want to make sure that you're attaching the strap in alignment with your princess line. So on the back piece, the seam that connects the side back and the center back, that seam, that's where you're going to place one end of your strap. And then in front, the seam that connects your center front to your side front, that's where you are going to place your straps. So basically, you are placing your straps in alignment with the princess seams. So now after I have placed my straps, I stitched my straps, I'm going to take my facing piece and I'm going to put it right sides together with my top piece and I'm just going to stitch it in place. From there, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim off the excess seam allowance and then clip the curves so that it's easier for me to turn my piece inside out and it's laying nice and flat. I do want to apologize for the noise. It's kind of raining right now, so you might be hearing a little bit of the rain outside. So I am sorry for that, you guys. So now what I am going to do is I'm just gonna go ahead and complete a top stitch or an edge stitch. I'm doing this by just simply pushing my seam allowance towards the facing. Then I'm going to be stitching close to the edge on the facing, about 2 millimeters away from that seam. And then I did want to mention that with the top piece, I'm sure you guys can see that it has been the edge, the center back seam has been finished. So you want to make sure that you are finishing your center back seams using a zigzag stitch or an overcross foot if you have one. Now we are going to go back to the skirt. For the skirt, you want to make sure that the seam that you want to put the seam that you where you're going to be placing your strap, basically, sorry. You want to make sure that you finish those raw edges on both sides. I'm sure you can see, if you look really closely, you can see that those edges have been finished. And then now you want to kind of measure how long you want your slit. You might want your slit really high up there. You might want your slit. This is all optional and up to you how you want that slit. I've put that pin in place to know that this is how much I want my slit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stitch like I normally would stitch a normal stitch with my normal settings. I'm going to stitch it and then when I get to that point where my slit is going to start, I go a back tack and then I change the settings on my sewing machine to be a loose spacing stitch and then I'm going to stitch all the way down until I reach the hem of that skirt. Then I want to take it to my iron. I'm going to open that seam up and then I'm going to press it down with an iron. Over here, I've pressed it down with an iron, and then I've put my pin back in place to indicate that, okay, this is where my slit starts. Now, what I'm going to do is, I do have like a loose basting stitch. This is the quickest and neatest way to actually do a really neat slit. I'm going to now go in, and I'm starting with the right side of my slit. I'm like stitching about 5 millimeters away from the from the center seam, from the seam that we made for the slit. Sorry, from the seam. And then when I get to the top over there, I'm just gonna quickly turn it around. Then I'm gonna go back and forth, back and forth. Then I'm gonna go all the way down. So basically, I'm stitching to keep that seam to keep that slit in place. Then I'm going to use my seam ripper to actually open up that seam again. So now I have my slit. I'm gonna move on to actually attaching my skirt piece to my top piece. I'm just doing this by lining up the top and the skirt at the waist seam, making sure that I am putting the pieces right sides together. Then I'm going to pin everything, make sure that I hit all the lines. Then I'm going to go ahead and stitch, then cut off this extra seam allowance, and then obviously finish it with my overcast foot. Now I'm going to take the dress and turn it and pin the center back seams right sides together. And at this point, I'm preparing to put my zipper in. So what I'm gonna do, right, is this is in my previous videos, you might see me do this a lot, but basically I'm just gonna pin that center back seam, and then I'm going to pay attention to the mark that indicates the zipper, right? Then I'm just gonna stitch the stitch. Yeah, I'm gonna stitch that center back seam up until the zipper, or from the zipper going down. So now I noticed that I did this in a kind of an odd way, but from where my zipper indication mark is, I'm going to go over it with the basting stitch, and I'm going to stitch all the way up to where the facing basically starts, right? So I'm going to stitch all the way up. I don't know why I chose to do it in this kind of way, but this is the way I chose to do it. But this stitch that I'm doing right now, that's a basting stitch, right? So the stitch that goes from your zipper indication all the way down to your hemline, that's going to be your real stitch. So the reason why I put this basting stitch is so that I can use it as a guide for when I'm attaching my zipper, because this is how I attach my zipper. Now I'm going to pin my zipper. I'm going to stitch my zipper onto that. The right side of my zipper is going to get stitched onto the right seam allowance, basically. So I'm going to stitch the zipper, and I'm going to repeat this process for the other side of the zipper. Then I'm going to grab my seam ripper, and then I'm just going to then open up that seam, and then you guys will see, the zipper emerge, basically. So I repeated the process. I repeated the process for the other side of the zipper. Now I'm grabbing my seam ripper, and I'm just opening it up. So what I like to do is after I've opened up that seam, I do stitch the zip in place again one more time to make sure that I'm getting as close to the zipper teeth as I possibly can. So when you are done installing the zipper, I don't show it in this video, but you are then gonna go ahead and just hem your dress. And how you would do this is you would fold your hemline inwards twice and then press it down with an iron and then stitch it down using a straight stitch. After that, you will be done with the dress. Also, make sure that you are stitching your facing onto your zipper and then turning it inside out. And yeah, then you should be done.